Welcome to The Week Ahead, a podcast by SBM Intelligence. I'm your host, Veronica Pana Igube. Every Friday, we explore stories that are shaping our continent. Senegal president on Friday, May 22nd, fired Sonko, the prime minister, a longtime ally, following political disagreements within the ruling party. Despite this dismissal, Sonko remains influential after being elected Speaker of Parliament. Could this political split affect Senegal's stability and democratic progress? Nigeria's Drug Enforcement Agency seized a $363 million meth lab hidden in an Ogun forest, making one of Nigeria's biggest drug busts. Could this operation weaken drug trafficking networks in the country? The NNPC has accused Dangote Refinery of attempting to create a monopoly in Nigeria's fuel sector amid ongoing tensions over fuel supplies and pricing. Could this dispute affect competition and fuel prices in Nigeria? Joining us today for further insights is Confident Mark Harry, a security analyst at SBM Intelligence. Thank you, Confident, and welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Veronica. It's great to be back here. Good afternoon.
It's good to have you. Thank you so much. It's always interesting when you come on the podcast and the conversations that we have. Let's start on our first story. We begin with Senegal, where the president is having this rift with his long-term ally, Sonko. So he fired him from being prime minister. And now we've seen kind of like a rebirth. For me, it's like Phoenix rising. You're seeing Sonko rising and becoming the head of parliament. It must have come as a shock to the president because it's like you're firing someone from being your prime minister, and 1 minute you blink and the person is um the the Speaker of Parliament, because the executive has to work with the lawmakers. It's kind of they have to have a good relationship, because in having that, the laws that would benefit the people as well as benefit the state will work. On the other hand, it's also good for democracy because there will be checks and balances. But if they are friends who have had like this rift, now would the checks and balances be based on um interest of the people or personal vendetta? So let's start. What caused, just give us a background story to our listeners. What has caused the issue between these two friends? Um, we're also seeing the effect of Sanko becoming prime minister. What do you think is the response of the president, and how will this affect Senegal as a whole because of this whole political brouhaha, if I will call it that?
Okay. Yeah, I think it's important to start from the beginning. Um, so I think the story goes back a little to 2021. Sonko was the head of the current ruling party. The acronym is known as PASTEF, but in English, since my French is not so good, so you pardon my French, um, the name of the party is African Patriots of Senegal for Labor, Ethics, and Fraternity, also known as PASTEF in the French acronym. So Sonko founded the party in 2014, and over the years, the party has grown to have a coalition involving other parties such as Indawe Askanwi and Yewe Askanwi. So the then ruling government temporarily dissolved PASTEF between July 2023 and March 2024. So Sonko was the head of the party up until 2021, when he was accused. He had a legal trouble surrounding a rape case where he was alleged that he raped somebody and then threatened the person with death. The government on the case, many people thought it was witch hunting, it was politically motivated. But at some point in 2023, he was acquitted. But then that was not the end of his legal troubles because he was convicted on the charge of corrupting the youth. Veronica, believe me, I have absolutely no idea what that means. So and he was, in addition to that, he was also convicted of defamation against the Minister of Tourism then, which is Mami Nyang. That was in 2023. That same year, he was charged with fomenting insurrection and undermining state authority, which all had to do with the violent protest that was held when he was arrested and prosecuted between 2021 and 2023. Now, all of these troubles, all of these legal troubles, especially the conviction, made him ineligible to run for president in 2024. I should mention that the government as of the time was run by Macky Sall, which many people thought was frustrating the opposition because Sonko's passive party was the largest opposition party as of then. Then come the February 2024 elections, Pastef won an overwhelming majority in parliament. So, of course, they had to form government. Now, given that Sonko could not become president, he had to tap one of his lieutenants to become president, which was Bassirou Diomaye Faye, the current president of the party. So I wouldn't really put it and say that these two were friends. I wouldn't really say so. Faye was just a member of the party and, a top member of the party. And so it just made sense that he would become president. But anybody who had watched both men would see that at the very beginning, it was going to lead to problems. And it didn't really take long because when Pastor formed the government in 2024, they found that the previous government of Macky Sall hid a very large amount of debt from the public. And it didn't take long for the IMF to come knocking. I think the debt was about $1.9 billion, if I'm not mistaken. Where divergences and disagreements between Sonko and Sonko being prime minister. Okay, I forgot to mention that when Faye became president, he made Sonko his prime minister. So where matters came to a head was number one, how to deal with the public debts that they found. Now, based on President Faye's um, position and leaning, he wants to get a debt restructuring and possibly IMF bailout in the future, which Sonko did not want because Sonko is a populist and the IMF and Western institutions tend to get a lot of bad rep in this part of the world and especially the global south generally. So any sort of IMF deal would have rubbed really wrongly on his supporters. So Sonko is of the opinion that to clear out the debts, there needs to do this thing internally. I don't know how, but from Faye's position, he saw it as more important to cut back on subsidies that the state had given to people, I think things on petrol, energy, agriculture, and the likes, in order to be able to pay that debt. So this has been a key sticking point. And, Sonko had gone to the public prior to May to, indicate that things were not well between him and the president. And there have been a couple of, bust up until the past weekend when I think the president couldn't have it anymore and then he had to fire him. Now, in the lead up to Sonko's firing, we have seen, disagreements on the authority between the president and the prime minister because I think Sonko felt that the presidency is a collective of the parties, a collective of passive parties, not an independent institution. Therefore, the president should be subject to the party's control. And then Faye had decided that being under Sonko's shadow is really not really good for his long-term future and outlook. So he had decided to get the party machinery away from Sonko's control by setting up his own rival structures within the party. Matters came to a head, and then Sonko was fired. Now, in a strange twist of events, which many people actually did see coming, Sonko had actually gone to parliament and then has been elected as president of the National Assembly, which of course gives him some kind of, a position by which it is possible that he could impeach the president if the president did indeed decide to go with the whole IMF debt restructuring thing. So it puts them in an interesting position where uh, you know we have. I think the issue was even a trifecta of people where you have um, Faye and the finance minister Chikdiba saying that they want to go to the IMF to get debt restructuring, and and then Sonko blocking the president's attempt to remove fuel subsidy, which if they had done so would have saved them up to $2 billion. And Sonko's fear was that it is really going to lead to problems and for ordinary people and ordinary households. So that has largely been the issue. And I should also mention that the legislature is also being dominated by pastef. So one of the things that I think may have compounded their problem was that um, in the lead up to Sonko's firing, the party in parliament, that's the ruling party, passed a raft of legislations that could that was widely understood as an attempt to restore Sonko's eligibility for the 2029 presidential elections, which was a signal, an open signal that the party viewed him as a natural successor to the presidency. So all of this political fallout was what led to Sonko becoming head of the National Assembly, which by constitutional authority, if the president of the country is impeached, the head of the National Assembly automatically becomes president. So if you look at it, it puts Sonko in a very poor position to be president now. That is, if the impeachment procedures go against, President Faye, if he's impeached and then the Constitutional Court rules in favor of Parliament in the event that he's impeached, and puts not only Sonko in the position to become president now, but also puts him in the position to become president in the future, given his current popularity ratings. So that is just a background to it, because I think by way of an update, the president have appointed a former central bank executive, Amadou Alaminu Mohamed Low, as the new prime minister, and which I think, from my perspective, is an attempt to maintain confidence in the markets, or the markets to have confidence in the government, because this man is a technocrat, and then the financial markets will be watching. So yes, that's pretty much a summary of everything that has been going on in the lead up to last weekend's events.
I mean, I agree with you that this is very interesting, right? The power play, the power dynamics. And I mean, for me, I think that the best interest is supposed to be the interest of the people of Senegal, right? So it's the interest of whether Faye or Sanko, I mean, at the end of the day, they need to understand that the people matter, and that's the interest. And I mean, something interesting that you pointed out was like the debt restructuring and subsidy removal. For me, I think that as African nations, we need to really start to be learning lessons from other countries. I think Senegal can learn from the Nigerian experience, like if you were going to take out subsidy, I feel like it should be phased. There should be palliatives or things that are put in place to ensure that the shocks of the fuel removal subsidy is not drastic on the economy and the people as well. But I do understand, I mean, Sanko's views on saying, you know what, we don't want to lend as well, because with borrowing comes a lot of challenges as well, because you're going to pay the money, you're going to pay the interest, and sometimes you also have to dance to the tune as a nation of those who are giving you funding as well. But I mean, interesting times. Looking forward to see I mean, how it plays out for Senegal. And now we're back to Nigeria, where the Nigerian Drug Enforcement Agency seized um 363 million meth lab. And I mean, I mean, it's a revelation because in Ogun State, I mean, it was hidden. People did not even understand. I mean, if you watch some of the retrieval videos, I mean, shocking that this drug bust is happening in Nigeria. I mean, for me, it was really, really like a revelation. I'm like, do we have like this kind of capacity for meth? What if this has been existing for that long? What is the effect it has had on Nigerians? Because it's also exposing Nigerians to that level of drugs, the effects we're also having on young people as well. It just goes down to say, how could this have happened in our country? But thankfully, it's been, exposed, if I may use that word. But I mean, what's your take on this story? And what do you think this operation can do? Has it weakened the drug trafficking network in Nigeria? Um, what should be the next steps to ensure that this doesn't happen again in Nigeria? That we don't have a meth lab hidden in a forest?
I mean, I really don't know, but as you know, is that Nigeria has a really big drug problem. I think it was in 2019, I saw this report from Al Jazeera where they mentioned tramadol usage rates in Nigeria, and then they said, I think across Africa, Nigeria had the largest usage of tramadol. Then I think it was about 5 million users. It is possible that the number must have gone down given the heavy clampdown on tramadol and then making it a prescription drug. But that doesn't mean that the medical process is kosher enough to not let it fall through the cracks. But in place of tramadol, there have been a couple of other drug users. I mean, if you party with people who are party heads, you get to hear different kind of names for the raining drugs. You hear molly, you hear. I mean, I don't know. I don't even. There's so many of them. You hear Muli, you hear Colorado, you hear several ones. Because even the basic things like cannabis and weed do not really do it for them. I think the Southeast also had a problem recently where they had a methamphetamine problem that was affecting the youth. The local drug was Impulumili or something. That was the name. Yes, that was the name. So I think if you go back a year before the um, Al Jazeera documentary, there was a national drug use survey in 2018 that was published in support from the UNODC, which found that um, the previous year had a drug prevalence rate of 14.4% among people aged between 16 to 64. That is about 14.3 million Nigerians. So that's nearly three times the global average at the time. So some of the leading drugs there was cannabis. It was followed by non-medical use of opioids, again, tramadol and codeine. I don't know if you remember that period when we had a lot of sensitization around codeine, and then
Yeah.
NAFDAC was recalling a lot. So yeah, so about nearly 3 million people as of the time suffered from drug use disorders. And so, given that time till now, one thing that has sharply risen is the use of methamphetamine. Not just the use, but the production. So if you check the news reports about this large drug boss, you see that about a couple of foreigners, I think Mexicans, were arrested. They
Yes,
call them
foreigners
methamphetamine.
were arrested as well.
Yeah, they call them cooks and everything. So if you take stock of some of the security operations that the Nigerian military had done ever since the whole anti-IPOB operations in the southeast, you get to find that more often than not, you will see reports of them busting a drug lab in one forest or another. And the beautiful thing about the southeast is that it is densely populated. It has more urban centers than rural centers. And so those kind of things are not things that you could do in a large forest like in Ogun State. So which means that you're doing it in people's houses, you're doing it in urban areas where people are living, So that is to a means of telling you how widespread the whole trade is. And more often than not, you get to hear NZLA busting a cannabis farm in Ondo, which seems to grow a lot of them and the likes. Now, this is not particularly surprising because, I mean, look at the amount, $363 million, $363 million worth of, drugs and chemicals. It's not surprising to me, and it should not be surprising to our listeners because Nigeria is a very important hub for the drug trade in West Africa. I think it is only by a whisker that we have escaped being known as a narco state. We have a key narco state in West Africa, which is known as Guinea. Now, if you cast your mind back to the coup that happened in Guinea last year, I think President Goodluck Jonathan was there as an observer after the election. He came out to say that it wasn't because of anything that the coup happened or some of the reasons that were being peddled in the media. It was a drug trade, as in the leading ruling elites in the country had disagreements about the drug trade, and then the presidency was involved, and the president simply handed over the government to the military instead of allowing the opposition to become to form a government. If you look at Guinea-Bissau, the picture is really not that different because, um, I mean, shipments that make their way all the way from Brazil usually make it to ports in Nigeria before they make their way down to Europe and the Americas. Guinea-Bissau and Nigeria are usually very important transshipment hubs, for these things. And so This is not particularly surprising. But what is surprising is that it has taken this long for NAFDAC to, sorry, for the NDLE to carry out such a bust, because if you had been following many of the drug usage and the meth labs and all of these things that are popping up, I mean, it doesn't take a soothsayer to ask the average person on the street or the average drug or meth user on the street where their supply and the other thing is. Yes, they may have been discreet and everything, but given the amount of support the NDLA has, I would think that this kind of a drug bust must have been done earlier, given especially the proliferation of methamphetamine in the southeast.
I mean, for me, is I mean, you're an analyst as well in the field, so you have more knowledge on this. And but I mean, one thing that you pointed out is that we're having foreigners, right, being arrested. I don't think that foreigners can come into our country and start these things without having the backing of some people. So for me, I'm like, who are the real guns behind this? Because of course, we're going to see prosecution of these foreigners, but are we going to catch the big guns who are after this as well? I mean, that's one question at the back of my mind. You talked about we're also not seeing, it's not only the usage we're seeing, but we're seeing more of the production as well, right? But for me, it also calls to the fact that as I mean, you mentioned how people are going for parties and are using. I feel like it also calls down to not only government. So government has a hand in it with what the NDLEA are doing, but I think that there's also a call to other players or key stakeholders like the family unit as well, the community unit, the religious leaders, you know. I feel like we should not just be bystanders. I mean, when we see people take drugs or engage in it, it's to call that out as well. When people are in parties, to raise awareness of not only what effect is going to have immediately on your body, but the long-term effect as well. Just, I feel like that's picking up and, acting on it and calling out as things happened back in the day. I mean, because like growing up, like if you're leaving your home and you're committing any crime on the street, you already know that somebody who is an adult will call you out and can even just take you back home and report you to your parents. I mean, I feel like that sense of community as well should be done by people as well. But let's move over to our final story where we're looking at NNPC accusing the Dangote Refinery of attempting to create a monopoly in the fuel sector. I mean, just give us a background to what this story is about and what are your thoughts on the creation of a monopoly, what effect it will have on Nigeria as well.
Yeah, I think to start with, the issue has gone on since Dangote got the license for his refinery, and he has tried to take advantage of the Petroleum Industry Act, that encourages local refining capacity. So Dangote's refinery can take up to about can refine up to about 650,000 barrels per day, which is quite a shortfall, you know, of what Nigeria actually needs. And so the NNPC as well as the NNDPRA, that is the Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority, it has brought in problems with them because both entities, government entities, have also tried to import fuel and granted licenses to other people. NNPC can import fuel and also give licenses to other fuel importers. Dangote saw it as a threat to his business because, according to him, the PIA encourages, other local refining capacity, and he has tried to bridge that gap. So this has become a recurring problem because, from the NNPC standpoint, they believe that it is actually dangerous for you to have for the entire country to depend only on one particular source. It is not safe for energy security. It is not good for national security, especially given the fact that by allowing Dangote to monopolize refining capacity as well as imports and exports, it could lead to a situation where the entire country and the government will be held hostage by one particular person. So the matter has gone to the courts. The NNPC has argued that um, that the law permits the issuance of import licenses to companies with local refining licenses or established records in international crude oil and petroleum products training. So they also added that the regulators also retain discretion to manage fuel imports. That's under Nigeria's backward integration policy, and that there is no outright ban on fuel imports except where local production sufficiently meets domestic demand. Now, bear in mind, I told you that Dangote's daily production does not meet the domestic demand. There's still a shortfall, which is where it makes sense to allow fuel importers to import. So NNPC also stated that Dangote Refinery has failed to provide credible, independent, and verifiable evidence that it could consistently meet the country's total fuel demand and guarantee uninterrupted nationwide supply. So this thing has been brewing for some time, even since as far back as 2024 when Dangote Refinery started. If you remember the issue between the leadership of the NMDPRA under Farouk Ahmed and Mr. Dangote, where Farouk Ahmed has been trying to deny Dangote the opportunity to be a monopolist, and Dangote has been fighting him. So Dangote accused Farouk Ahmed of corruption and allegation that the NDPRA was collaborating with international traders and fuel importers to frustrate local refining by continuing to issue import licenses. That was where he also added that Mr. Ahmed was living beyond his legitimate means, that 4 of his children were enrolled in a special secondary school in Switzerland, and asking questions around abuse of office and then possible regulatory integrity, which by that, Dangote was probably alleging the fact that the people Mr. Ahmed was collecting money from were the ones that were likely funding his lifestyle. Anyways, to cut the long story short, Mr. Ahmed later resigned. And then in that same year, Dangote Refinery got into a lawsuit and asked the courts to award $100 billion, $100 billion naira in damages against the NNDPRA for issuing import licenses to some marketers and then permitting the import of petroleum products. So the marketers were listed as NNPC, Matrix Petroleum Services, AYM Shapa Limited, AA Rano, Tea Time Petroleum, and 2015 Petroleum Limited. The stock was filed in 2024, and the plaintiff asked the court to declare that the NNDPRA violated sections 31, sections 317, subsection 8, and subsection 9 of the Petroleum Industry Act by issuing license for importation of petroleum products. To cut the long story short, I think in July 2025, the lawsuit was withdrawn. They didn't tell us exactly why Dangote withdrew the lawsuit. But all of these things point to the fact that there seems to be a misunderstanding of what the government should do or what the government really wants to do, not just with Dangote, but when it comes to meeting domestic demand. Yes, one could make all of the argument that we have not really had fuel scarcity ever since Dangote Refinery came online. But the thing now is that we are now buying fuel at higher prices than we used to prior to Dangote Refinery coming online. So what I think Dangote Refinery has done is to plug the scarcity gap by making fuel available. But even at that, there does not seem to be enough confidence on the part of the federal government that Dangote can indeed meet what is Nigeria's domestic supply. And so that is where the whole thing has been. Ever since Dangote's career going into cement, going into sugar, going into different industries, there has been the looming accusation hanging over his head that he is getting government to ban imports of some of these products for him to be the monopolist to control the entire market. And I think that that scent has followed him into his latest venture, which is petroleum. And he does feel that the federal government is refusing to play ball. So the NNDPRA may have done away with their own head, that's Mr. Farouk Ahmed, but then it shows with this lawsuit that this is a battle that Dangote is going to continue to keep fighting, given that the NNPC, which is the state-owned oil company, has gotten in on the act. So you could make all of the argument that it is possible that some of these importers, petroleum importers, have gotten the NNPC or have got giving kickbacks, alleged corruption and everything. But one cannot totally remove the entirety of the argument that relying on only one particular local refiner, especially dominating the market, is good for a national energy security.
I mean, it's something to watch and see how, the regulator and Dangote are able to reach an agreement as well. Thank you very much, Confidence, for joining us on the podcast. It's been a pleasure having you today.
Thank you once again for having me.
You're welcome. To all our listeners, this podcast is by SBM Intelligence. You can access our podcast by searching for SBM Intelligence anywhere you find podcasts. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe, like, share, and let us know your thoughts in the comment section. For deeper insights into our work, you can visit our website at sbmintel.com. Remember to connect with us on all our social media platforms. You can find us on X, Facebook, Blue Sky, and LinkedIn at SBM Intelligence. Thank you for tuning in to the week ahead. Join us next Friday for more updates that are shaping the African continent.